Welcome back to the podcast that explores how to create meaningful art experiences in the built environment. I'm your host, Martha Weidman, CEO and co-founder of 9.Arts. If you haven't already, be sure to download the state-of-the-art report at the 9.Arts website, 9.arts.com. This is the place where we bring heart and soul to the data of our survey, stories behind the numbers, the human element to the statistics, and you can definitely learn more about the ROI of art and culture by downloading that report. We have a very special guest today. Her name is Vivian Phillips. I consider her the Minister of Culture for the city of Seattle. She's played a role in some of the most high impact cultural decisions and installations on the West Coast. And she grew up in the Central District, and she's lived the change that has happened in that neighborhood over the past decades. I'm very honored to be able to work with Vivian on an exciting project called Arté Noir at 23rd and Union in the Central District. And at that project, we're working to reestablish a Black arts community through a very unique art space that Vivian will tell you more about and provide a national example for reparative equity. Stay tuned, enjoy the show, and learn more about this project at artenoir.org. That's ARTENOIR.org. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast, where we talk about how art and culture influence the built environment. I am thrilled to introduce our audience today to Vivian Phillips, an art consultant in Seattle. And Vivian is what some might call the Minister of Culture. She has been involved on some large-scale projects and really impacted the entire cultural development of the city of Seattle, touching groups like the Seattle Theater Group on their board, working with Langston Hughes, influencing the Paramount Theater's development project, being on the For Culture board. She was part of the mayoral team that worked on the Olympic Sculpture Park, and of course, a big impact on the Seattle Arts Commission. So you just can't even say enough about this one woman's impact on an entire city's cultural development over time. So really thrilled to welcome you to the show, Vivian. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. It's just another way of saying how old I am.
Well, you have used every day wisely from everything that I can see. So I hope we're all so lucky.
I'm trying, Martha. I'm still trying.
Well, Vivian, tell us from your perspective, tell us our listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do and why it matters.
Yeah, thank you so much, Martha. I am a native of Seattle. So there's that piece that makes the city incredibly important to me. I have watched the arts and cultural scene in Seattle have some really epic moments and some not so great moments. Excuse me, I worked on the Arts Ecosystem Research Project with Seattle University, and that kind of documents the evolution of arts in the Seattle area from the pivotal moment of 1962 when the World's Fair occurred here. And it was really a moment in time when arts and culture became incredibly ensconced into our daily lives in many, many ways. So, I've just had art and culture and all of that in my DNA for a very long time. I call myself a wannabe because I always wanted to be a dancer. I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to do all these things. I was never good at much of it. So, and there's still time, right? But what I found was a real deep love for assuring that arts and culture is available, vibrant, and surviving and thriving in the community in which I live. So that's been the impetus and remains a passion point for me. So I don't think it'll ever go away.
Well, I feel very lucky to have had the opportunity to meet you and be able to work with you on the early stages of one of the key impact influential projects that you're working on. And I'd love if you could tell our listeners a little bit more about this next thing that you're excited about coming on deck soon.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. And I have to say, I don't know that I would have made it this far, Martha, had it not been for your support. You know, you've always given me the courage to step into unknown territory. But this particular project is the Midtown Square project. It is located in the heart of Seattle's historic African American community called the Central District. And what we have seen in the Central District is a decline, a steady decline of Black residency due to gentrification and development from like 70% in 2000 down to under 15% 20 years later. And this project is one that engaged in a couple of years of community process because it was such a touchstone for the Black community. I had the chance to work with Rico Carandongo, who is an architect that's worked on a number of projects here. He's now the director of Seattle's Office of Planning and Community Development. But on this particular project, Rico really laid the groundwork. He was the one that led the community process. I came into the project to really kind of codify all of the elements that the community said they wanted to see represented on this building. It's a block, a full city block almost, with 500 units. It's a major, major development. And so I just poured through 2 years of conversation, community charrettes, that sort of thing, and was able to develop an art plan for the building that was representative of what the community said they wanted. What the community wanted was to have the legacy and the history of this community represented, but they also wanted to have a level of inspiration. So the art theme became reverence and discovery. And we have a building now that, in and of itself, is a piece of art. And it represents a lot of the central area history, and it also is inspiring. As a result of that process with Lake Union Partners, we ended up developing a relationship that now is culminating in Arté Noir, which is one of my passion projects. It started out as an online magazine in May of 2021, and we incorporated as a nonprofit organization in June in order to carry this project forward. So we're taking this online presence that is all about Black art and culture, and we are developing a Black art and culture retail location as well as an art gallery that is the anchor for this large development, and it sits prominently right on the corner of 23rd and Union. So we are so super close to being in a construction phase to prepare the space for occupancy. One of the things that is very important to me about this project is the fact that I was never interested in being a retail lessee. I never wanted to, depend on foot traffic and sales and, all of that in order to sustain this kind of presence. So we are actually in a position to purchase the space, 3,200 square feet, which we will we will own in perpetuity, right? And it is a gift to the community. My interest is in reestablishing, if you will, a Black art and culture presence in this community that has been so gentrified and so changed and so developed, so that we can have not only that reverence, but we can also have some discovery.
This is just such an incredible effort that you are leading, Vivian. There are a lot of people that think about how do we create equity in underrepresented communities? How do we create opportunities for multi-generational wealth in a redlined community? And a lot of people talk about this idea, but very few people have been able to have the bravery and the courage, as you said, to move forward with a concept, to come up with a concept and then move ahead with it. Because what you're describing is it's so big. It's so big because we're not talking about, as you said, having a lease in this property that will, serve the Black art and culture community and feature Black artists and allow them an opportunity for this exhibition and recording studio and all these great cultural amenities that'll be a part of that. But there is uh, a, a raise that you're working on to buy this space. And that means that you are fundamentally, part of the equity structure of this project. And that's a big deal. It's a really big deal. So congratulations. It's just huge.
Thank you. I think, when we talk about wealth generation and reparative investments, which is a new concept in many ways, but it is something that I have found not only in municipalities, but in private philanthropy. People are interested in places and ways that they can provide that kind of equitable support. And for Art Noir, our business plan is set up so that one, the Black Gallery owners, it's also a nonprofit organization, they will run the gallery, but they'll have an opportunity to be in this space rent free. So that provides them with the opportunity again to actually give all of the wealth back to the artist. The All of the wares that we will sell in this location that are created predominantly by local artists, they will receive 100% of the proceeds. We will only carry the cost of production, right? We'll recoup that. But it's a whole different kind of way, as you say, of looking at equity. And my intention here is to prove this process, right? To actually show that this is something that can work so that we can replicate it in other communities. And I will say that, we've received an incredible outpouring of support. And we've not done a public campaign to raise the funds. It's also necessary to recognize that the developers who were not particularly on board initially with this concept of condominiumizing the retail portion of this building, they saw an opportunity and they pushed forward with that. So, giving priority to Black owned businesses in this particular project has now become more than just they have an opportunity to have their business located there. They will also have the ability to do lease options. So, again, we want to prove this concept. And I'm no longer afraid. I'm, going full throat into this and intend to make it work.
What I have seen, being able to go through some of this journey with you is the impact of what you're doing. It's almost this ripple effect. So initially, the concept with Art Noir being able to purchase their space and condominiumizing the building so that Art Noir could have an option to buy. That was a really kind of progressive step and a big hurdle that we had to get through. But once we were on the other side of that, as you're saying, that became this pivotal moment where all of a sudden the thinking just shifted. And then everyone started saying, oh, well, if we can do that with Art Noir, well, why couldn't the restaurant? Why couldn't the Black owners of the restaurant own theirs? And what about the bar or the bakery or the hair salon or anyone else who's in that building do the same thing? So it was just this pivotal moment that you've led forward. And as you said, now sharing what you're doing with the world, it could be done in other places. Now, if you could pick a city to do next, what would be your next one?
Detroit keeps flowing off my tongue. I don't know why necessarily. And that might be somewhere in the future. I do believe that there are other opportunities in this region. And I think that this is a concept that needs to be further explored here in the Puget Sound region. And then maybe we can think about branching out into the Midwest and maybe even Denver. Who knows?
I think we can help you there.
I mean, why not? Why not? Um, And I one of the projects that I worked on here in the past year was the development of the Cultural Space Agency, which is a public development authority that was ratified by Seattle City Council last year. And the focus for the Cultural Space Agency is to work with community to actually put them in ownership positions for arts and cultural spaces where development is happening or where displacement is happening, all of that. And um, I'm so happy that this project has the capacity to be kind of a shining star for the Cultural Space Agency. um, while they have been supportive of the project and I have some partnership with them, and we are still talking about how can we leverage equity in this project to help stimulate other projects. So the ripple effect is so big, and I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea that this would be the way. But I'm saying that to say that as well as having extremely wonderful philanthropic support for this project, that the city of Seattle developed a strategic investment fund where $30 million was set aside last year to do exactly this, to get people into reparative opportunities for cultural development. And we got $1.5 million from the city of Seattle for this $2 million purchase.
Well, what you're, describing, it takes so many different people and entities to pull this concept together. So you've talked about the city side, you've talked about the private development side, and took both of those groups. And on this show, we do have people from the private development community who are listening in. We have some people who are the actual developers, people who are landowners, people who are architects, people who influence those decisions. So can you tell us a little bit more about how art and culture influences the built environment in a big way? And then maybe some stories about what you went through in this particular project and advice you might have for the private sector.
And I'll go back and credit the city of Seattle again. Several years ago, they started a program to develop cultural arts districts or arts and cultural districts. And with the designation of a cultural arts district came a bit of support, like $50,000, right? And that was mostly focused on branding as well as supporting the survival of different entities. The Capitol Hill area was the first arts and cultural district in Seattle. My community, the central area, was the second arts and cultural district. And with that, there was a recognition that, first and foremost, arts and culture can stem erasure. So what we saw was, with more development And like I mentioned earlier, the decline of the Black population, we were facing real erasure. Arts and culture is what helped that not be so. So there are things like the renaming of streets that recognize significant arts and cultural leaders that are, you know, from this area. I live just off of Ernestine Anderson Way, and she was, an international jazz great, but she lived in Seattle. Douglas Barnett was one of the founders of Black Arts West, one of our first or early Black theater companies in Seattle. So that's, one of the ways. But then the city also owns all of these electrical boxes that you see sitting on the streets, right? It's where all the conduits and connections happen. Well, there was a dedicated effort to paint those boxes with the images of African Americans from this community, right? So that's another element of how it impacts the built environment. Um, it also engages artists, right? So it gives artists work. And when we talk about built environment, I think about people first. It's not just the way things are planted, it's not just the architecture, it's the people. Vulcan did a major development that displaced a number of Black businesses in the Central District as well. And they also engaged a very comprehensive arts program. So when you approach this building, not only do you recognize that there is a West African influence in the building design, but the art created by African Americans from this community adorns the building. And like I said, at Midtown, the entire building has become a work of art that honors and recognizes everyone from, Edwin T. Pratt to and including Ernestine Anderson to people who are lesser known like D. Charlene Williams, who she actually founded the Central Area Business Chamber of Commerce, right? And so we're incorporating our lived aesthetic into the way our environment looks, just as a reminder, and not just as a reminder, but as a reminder that we were here and we are still here.
It's stunning, and it's something that you can see from miles away. Not only is it just visually appealing and attractive, it's got this incredible rich story, and the deeper you dig, the more you find. So I think it's what you've done is just create such a successful narrative that manifested in this physical way that I think enhances the way that people feel about being in that space and the way people feel not only on the interior, but right, the exterior and how that building integrates with the community around it and celebrates the place where it is. And when you think about placemaking, there's not only placemaking from the standpoint of creating a place that people want to be, because as you said, buildings are about people. That's what they're for. And the places in between the buildings are where people go. So how do we make that all feel alive and, full of culture and soul? Because that's the place that we live in. And not only is placemaking this concept, but thinking about the community. What sense of responsibility do you have and do you think that developers have to bring a community benefit aspect to their work?
I think that often this concept of using art to create community is not taken as seriously or as far as it can be taken. It ends up being a bit of art washing, right? So there are so many buildings that have, like a splash of something on one side. And it's like, look at what we did. you know? Um, but I think that the developers, like union partners, understood when they engaged my services for the art plan that art consultancy was not just a job for me. Art consultancy was a lifestyle. And I think that I have had the a feeling of an ultimate responsibility to my community to serve it because this is the community that nurtured me. This is the community where I lived. I was raised. This is the community where my mother worked hard to sustain opportunities for her contemporaries. And so I think that when developers are engaging with um, experts to help guide how they conduct their business in new communities, there has to be a level of authenticity that is backed by resources, and that commitment has to be one that's not just to get through a permitting process. It's one that has to really serve the community. And I think that's, for me, what has stood out about this project. And, admittedly, I don't think the developers were exactly where I was. We were not at the same place, 2.5 years ago. But I believe that once they understood really how committed I was to bringing the community to the table in a real way to make decisions, not just to advise. Because this panel of individuals who selected the artist for this project, they made the decisions. And my commitment to them, because my integrity is very important to me, my commitment to them is that their decisions would be upheld.
Are you seeing any trends in your sector and in your work that you think will impact things for the future?
I am seeing more people like myself who are being engaged by developers to actually provide some grounding points for how to approach arts incorporation and placemaking into their projects. I'm hopeful that that trend continues. I am also seeing more intentionality. And that makes me very happy. One of the things that I become a little bit concerned about at times, and for instance, there's one other development that I am consulting on, and when they want to see someone represented in images on the building, the first name that comes up is Jimi Hendrix, right? And I'm like, wait, no, I love Jimi Hendrix, don't get me wrong. But Jimi Hendrix is really overdone in the Black community. It's like, okay, we get it. We get it. We know he's important. And in fact, I just had dinner with Jimmy's sister last night, so she knows how I feel. But um, and she knows that I'm authentic about this. But it's important that we start to or that they start to really think about what is it that they don't know and how to find out what they don't know. There's so many incredible resources to really dig into. And so I'm constantly feeling like I'm pushing people into those resources. Take a look at blackpast.org. Look at the Black history of Seattle. Take a look at the Museum of History and Industry and the ways in which they have presented exhibits, like, for instance, Al Smith's photography that documents the 1940s jazz scene in Seattle. There's so many resources out there that I'd like people to trend toward in order to find out what it is they don't know.
Well, it starts with education and taking it upon yourself to learn and, you know, do some of your own self-awareness and self-education about the history in those places where you're building.
Yeah, understand when you say you want to serve the community, really do some introspection around what does that look like? What does that mean? And when you're serving the community, are you serving the community with the community, or are you doing this kind of savior thing where you think you're doing the right thing and it ends up being offensive?
Well, thank you for walking us through those examples and the stories that you've shared on an incredible journey, not only over the past couple of years, but in the experiences that you've had in shaping the art and culture for the city of Seattle. I like to ask everyone on the show if you could tell us about a piece of artwork or a personal art experience. Maybe it was a concert, a play, piece of architecture, a museum visit that made an impression on you or that was especially memorable.
Well, I just had one of those experiences last week. Barbara Earl Thomas and Derek Adams have an exhibit at the Henry Art Gallery called Packaged Black. And it is really a reflection on the ways in which the Black community represents itself externally. How do we present ourselves? But it's also a reflection on the contrast between the traditional ideals of presentation versus the funky nature of the Black presentation. Well, it is a fabulous exhibit, but it's made even more fabulous because she did a piece with me and my daughter.
Oh,
I think if I think back, and this also tracks back a bit to Barbara Earl Thomas because she was a student of Jacob Lawrence and also very influential. Actually, she directs the Jacob and Gwen Knight Lawrence Fellowship for the Seattle Art Museum. But it was in 1995, I think, when the Seattle Art Museum did a Jacob Lawrence retrospective. And I saw his work up close and personal for the very first time.
well, if our listeners want to learn more about you and your work and make a donation to Art Noir to support this incredible work that you're doing for the Central District community, where can they find you and learn more about you?
You can find us at artnoir.org. It's ARTENOIR.org.
Well, you heard it here first, everyone. Thanks for listening in and learning more about this incredible work that Vivian has done in the city of Seattle and for the entire community of the Central District. So I hope that you'll check her out and consider making a contribution to this exciting work that they're building, this exciting project that they're building in the Central District. So, Vivian, thank you so much for being on the show. You're a true inspiration.
And thank you, Martha, for being my consigliere and all of those things that you've been, my supporter, my the wind beneath my wings. I really would not have been able to do this without you. So thank you.
Anything for the Minister of Culture of Seattle. At your service.
Much
All
love.
right. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of ... And to keep up with our latest episodes, be sure you subscribe to 9.arts on YouTube or search ... wherever you get your podcasts. Looking for an art consultant to transform your next project? Email us. Let's talk at 9.arts.com. Until next time, on behalf of everyone at 9 Arts, here's wishing you some inspiring art experiences.